Welcome back to this week's episode of Beyond the Forecast. So excited to have special guests with us today. This is Dallas Barber, big game biologist from the Wildlife Department, and we've been talking for years.
Yeah, quite a few.
Almost a decade now. I just love to pick Dallas's brain anytime I can about the big game, the elk, the deer especially here in Oklahoma, and you've been busy.
Yes.
The rut is on. The rut is something that I've been talking about a lot for forecasting reasons, for folks that are driving. The rut impacts people all across Oklahoma.
Absolutely. Yeah, so I mean, this time of year is just breeding season for our white-tailed deer and our mule deer across the state. So it really leads to some erratic behavior, all-day activity. So more times than not, your morning commute, your evening commute home is when you're seeing deer closer to sunset and sunrise. But now with breeding season going on, that activity kind of goes all day long, and they have thrown caution to the wind. So there's not really any rhyme or reason to where they are or why they're there. They are not going to avoid cars like they have in the past. So definitely something that you have to be aware of as a driver.
Can you talk a little bit about what the males do this time of year?
Yeah.
Something about the scrapes. I mean, I had my nephew out just over the weekend. We're seeing scrapes like crazy, and how that plays into it, what the deer do, how they run without eating, drinking. I mean, they run themselves ragged right now. And I think unless you're really into this and you're out in Oklahoma outdoors, you don't understand how fascinating this process is.
So, white-tailed deer, they breed one time a year, and that is kind of triggered by something called photoperiod. So that's the amount of daylight versus darkness. So we've kind of swept into that point of the year where that is starting to kick things off. So it puts our does into estrus, which is just their cycle that they go through. So now bucks are starting to tend does, so they'll kind of be out cruising around looking for receptive does. They're using their sense of smell to find those deer. So that happens, they're marking territory. So you had mentioned scrapes. That's one thing where they will go to areas. Usually a scrape is always going to be associated with some sort of tree, be it a big tree, little tree. The farther west you go, you kind of run out of trees, but they get pretty creative. So salt cedars, even things like fence posts, wood fence posts.
Oh, wow, I've never seen that.
So they'll paw up the ground, and they're using just scent glands as a form of communication. So in those paws, in between their hooves, they have an interdigital scent gland that they're using to kind of deposit scent there on the ground. And you've got to think about these kind of like, they're like the Facebook of the deer world. It's kind of like where everybody can go to communicate, to see who's in the neighborhood, is anybody new here, what do I need to be doing to kind of set up myself from a pecking order standpoint. So those more dominant bucks will kind of rule the roost. The smaller, more immature bucks are just kind of out running around trying to get what pieces they can. But it's just a really cool time of year. Those bucks really start to do some interesting behaviors. So that's when you're starting to see a lot of fighting going on. So, crashing antlers together. Again, we're just setting the pecking order on who's going to be kind of the top dog as far as breeding goes.
It's awesome to watch. It's fascinating. And it's fascinating to watch how the does behave, because the does will come by and they kind of check out those scrapes. What's that process like?
So it's kind of the same deal. They're going to urinate in those scrapes. It's the same scent communication that we had talked about with bucks. Bucks are also urinating in scrapes. So it just helps everybody understand who's in the neighborhood. For the doe standpoint, it's more of, hey, I'm receptive to, a boyfriend, so to speak. So that's
hey, big boy, you smell pretty. That sort of thing.
That's kind of how they work.
It's so cool to watch. And for folks that haven't had a chance to just watch this one simple process of what goes into it, and then we're talking just whitetail, we're not talking all the other animals. You learn so much, and it's fascinating for kids even to get out and just kind of watch their behavior, because the bucks, man, they get real tough. And
it's something that's pretty easy to find. Any tree line that you find, where you've got a field edge with, be it bodark trees or oak trees or any of our native species that we have, where they kind of form these lines. A lot of that's just from land management practices. So it's either a fallow field or just places that have been cleared to run cattle in. A lot of those scrape lines that we're talking about, they'll do multiple of these down that kind of row. And they're super easy to find because they're really visible. I mean, these deer have pawed the ground to bare dirt where it would be grass, so you can see them, and they'll be anywhere from, the size of a basketball up to like the size of a car hood. So it's something that if you are being diligent and paying attention to the ground, you can find them pretty easy.
If you're out with kids, I mean, I had my kids out, my nephew out just this past weekend, and we were coming across them one after another, walking along just with a certain tree line. My nephew kept calling them scratches. I found another scratch. I'm like, it's actually really a great thing to call it.
That's a good way to put it, for sure.
But it's such a cool time. And really, this is kind of predictable every year. It's sometimes around the same year. Can you talk a little bit about when the rut begins, when it ends in Oklahoma? Sometimes that's a little controversial. A lot of people think it's based on the weather.
Kind of some campfire talk, right?
Absolutely.
So, from our standpoint, from a biological standpoint, the peak of the rut is November 8th through the 12th.
Okay.
But it's very much shaped like a bell curve. So there is going to be some breeding going on before that. So, we're seeing conception dates as early as the middle to late parts of October.
Right.
And then, it goes up and it peaks out November 8th through the 12th. And then there's going to be breeding that happens later on in the year as well. And it can actually extend, into what you'll hear kind of a hot button word, the secondary rut, or even the tertiary rut. And that's going to be based on buck to doe ratios. So does that are not bred in their first estrus cycle, 28 days later, they'll cycle again. And if they're not covered, then 28 days later again. And they'll continue to do that until that photo period kind of tells their brain, hey, it's time to kind of shut things down. So when you start thinking about that from a biological standpoint, the reason they're doing that is because they're hedging their bet to try to have their fawn born when habitat conditions are the best.
Right, when it is
201 days later, we're looking into, April, May, even June timeframe. It just kind of depends on the year, but that rut's always going to happen at the same time every year because that photo period doesn't change.
Right.
It's always that same kind of narrow window. So regardless of weather or temperature, pressure, anything like that, it's always going to be the same. I always make a reference to people, if it was based on weather, there would be no rut in Florida because it's sunny and 75 every single day there, right? So just something to kind of consider is like, man, if you are looking in the future for, I want to go on a deer hunt.
Looking vacation.
Yeah, I want rut hunting to be kind of my main focus. The 8th through the 12th, it's hard to miss it.
Okay, so when it comes to folks that are watching right now and you're thinking, Lacey, why are you giving me this biology lesson? I'm a lifelong hunter, and for hunters, this is really important. Why do you want to hunt the rut?
Yeah, so you're obviously going to have just increased daytime movements. We have legal shooting hours where you can only harvest deer from 30 minutes before sunrise to 30 minutes after sunrise. And typically in the early seasons, we're talking early archery seasons on into muzzleloader seasons, temperatures are not conducive to all-day movement.
Right.
So really that kind of prime time is that like hour block in the morning, an hour block in the evening. But with the rut going on, they have thrown all of their behavioral standards just kind of out the window. So we have got one thing on the mind, and it's chasing girls. I mean, it's like a 13 or 14-year-old boy that's going to the roller skating rink. Do the kids do that anymore?
I think so.
And are we aging ourselves by talking about that?
I think so. I always say it's like Bambi, that they're Twitter pated.
Yes.
Like they don't know anything
exactly.
else.
So that rut period, it really ups the activity to where you're just upping your chances of seeing deer and being able to either put yourself in a spot that is going to help your success rates, or you can spot and stalk deer at this time of year where they've kind of thrown, like we've said, there's no cautionary kind of behavior from them. So you can really make a move and be successful.
And just what I have found too is you'll see deer that you haven't seen ever.
So yeah, typically deer kind of sticking to their home ranges. 1,000-ish acres on average here in our state.
Okay.
It's obviously going to be very dependent on habitat quality and things like that, but on average 1,000 acres is about what a deer kind of tends to stick to. But with this time of year, they break those barriers down and they'll go kind of out on ventures to kind of check on what's going on in other neighborhoods, right? So it definitely can be something where a lot of folks are focusing on trail cameras, using those to kind of take an inventory of, what deer are available for harvest in my area. And then all of a sudden, boom, here shows up this crazy buck that you've never seen before. And it can be exciting. So it's always one of those deals where it's like, you crawl up in the stand and you just have no idea what's going to happen.
And if you don't go out, you're never going to see it.
Yeah, exactly.
this time of year, talk about some of the things that hunters can use maybe to up their advantage. Are you into all of the, covering yourself in doe pee? Are you into rattling, or the bleats? What kind of calls or scents or all those
so
things help?
This is a time of year where some of those products can be helpful. I don't use a lot of them, more because I don't want to pay for them.
Sure.
But they can be used. They're a very specific use tool. So like, you're talking about estrus scents, things like that. Those are not going to be all that effective in October. But here over the next week or so, you can use some of those, A, to help cover your scent, but B, to help lure bucks into where you are because they smell what they think is a receptive doe. But as far as calling goes, it can be incredibly effective right now. So things like rattling, where you're taking, either a actual real set of shed antlers or antlers that you've harvested off another buck, and you can clash those together to simulate a fight. Deer are very curious, so it's something where bucks are going to hear that and they might cruise in just to check out and see what's going on. Grunt calls can be really effective this time of year, along with just doe bleats. So something where it really breaks down to kind of what you've done in the past or what's worked for you. I haven't had a lot of success with just blind calling. I know plenty of people that have, where it's just, every 30 minutes I'm going to crash these antlers together and see what goes on. I have had a lot of luck with when you actually have a visual on a deer and they might not be heading in the direction that you want them to, giving them a couple of those calls and kind of steer them to come check out what's going on.
I've had one hunt in particular rattling, and didn't see anything, but I was like, I'm going to try anything I possibly can. We're going to try to do what we can. Rattled, had this buck come in, and it's fascinating to watch because he come in looking for that. He came in looking for a fight. They come in puffed up, looking around, and the second you hit it again, it's like, where was that? It's amazing. It doesn't happen every time. I think it's one out of all the sits that I've done, but I keep thinking that's going to happen again.
But once you have it happen once, you're like, that's the only way I want to do this.
The only way to do this. Absolutely. So this year has been dry for much of our hunting season. It's been very, very warm. So how are you seeing just the behavior? Because I should point out, Dallas is a huge hunter as well. So biologist, but also a very avid hunter. And so you're out there experiencing these same things.
And so it's kind of counterintuitive to what most people would think in regards to like harvest numbers. So like years where we are in an extreme drought, you would think we wouldn't harvest as many deer. But it's actually the opposite. So years where we have really droughty conditions, we see high harvest numbers. And some of it is biological and some of it is just common sense. So like when we have drought, you have less leaf on the tree, you have shorter grasses, things like that. So visibility is better. If you can see deer, you can harvest deer, right? You also have less food on the landscape. So they're becoming more dependent on food plots, on feeders, things like that. This year is really interesting because we had an incredibly wet spring and early summer. So that led to a ton of food on the landscape.
There's so many acorns, Dallas. Oh my gosh.
And a ton of grasses and things that are going to keep us from visibly being able to see deer at any sort of distance. So we're kind of stuck in the middle right now. Harvest numbers for this year are actually a little bit higher than they were last year at this point, and I expect that trend to kind of continue, especially as we go into rifle season. But it's just kind of a hodgepodge of a year. Hunters have been really, really successful, and some of the quality of deer that I've been seeing harvested has been crazy.
That's awesome.
And a lot of that comes from the rains that we had in the spring. It just puts a buffet of food out on the landscape, and that's what goes into antler development. So that's something we call nutritional availability. So how much nutrition is out on the landscape right now, it really led for really good antler development.
What do you think going into rifle season? So rifle season opens this weekend.
This Saturday.
Weekend. We're getting
it's
so
here.
Like very close.
We were just talking about archery opening. And now here we are.
We call it the Orange Army. I mean, hundreds of thousands of folks sit in the woods for kind of that 2-week period. What do you want hunters to know going into this year?
I think that it's something where obviously the tradition of deer hunting will outweigh the conditions of the hunting that's going on. So I think people are going to be out there regardless of if it's hot, cold, rain, snow, sleet, whatever you want it to be. People are going to be out and about. I think that the biggest thing that I need people to understand is like antlerless deer harvest is very important.
Absolutely.
For the health of our deer herds, because when you start getting into areas where deer numbers are too high, you get into crop damage, you get into vehicle collisions, and then you also just get into poor health of animals. And it's just because, like we were talking about, the nutritional availability, it can only go so far. And so the more mouths that you have on that landscape, the poorer that those deer are going to be as far as condition wise. So just make sound management decisions when you're out hunting. You know, if you're unsuccessful in harvesting a buck, boy, a doe eats just as good, if not better. So something to consider there is just every time that you pull the trigger or choose not to pull the trigger, that's a management decision that you're making on your piece of property.
What do you recommend? I know it's probably different for the size of property, there's so many factors that go into it, but just as an individual hunter, even if you're going out to public land, what do you recommend hunters do as far as taking the buck-doe ratio?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we have bag limits set for this very reason.
Yeah.
We understand that not everybody's going to choose to fill that. You know, it's less than 1% of our hunters are filling that full bag limit every year. But, you know, we're at a spot in Oklahoma now where we've never had more deer than we have right now. So to help kind of alleviate some of that pressure on the landscape and on it themselves, we are in a great spot to where there's ample opportunity to harvest both bucks and does. And I would encourage folks to do both.
What about taking kids hunting? We always use this as an opportunity to talk about passing this on to the next generation. This is going to be, we've got some great weather coming
Looks
up.
very mild.
Yes.
Very mild. Some crisp mornings, so
Right.
they at least have to suffer a little bit.
Sure.
We don't want them to just like roll the red carpet out for them. No, but I mean, this is the best time of year to get a kid out. Rifle hunting, it really allows you to not be as conscious about, you know, your scent and all that kind of stuff, because the ranges of rifles are a little bit more effective than with archery equipment. So you can afford to not be so concerned with, oh man, did I do this or do that, whatever it may be, to kind of mask that scent. And it's just fun to be able to watch deer. Deer this time of year, we've kind of talked about it already. It's the greatest show on turf as far as what's available out there in nature. And it just makes for a fun experience for the kiddos. So that is something that I definitely encourage people to do, is always, you know, anytime you see any of the reports that I write, that's how I close out my article, is take somebody new. Because it is something that is important to the heritage of hunting, especially here in our state, is we've got to pass the torch, man.
So I have a brother-in-law, I've got to call him out here. He's 6'6", he didn't grow up hunting, but it's something that just being in our family now, he's been going out, has not harvested a deer yet. But just to point out to people, it's such an adrenaline rush.
Yes.
He has drawn back multiple times, still hasn't let an arrow fly because he can't calm down. I mean, I feel it because I get buck fever like crazy, but this even happens with does. And unless you're a hunter and you're sitting there and you're watching this animal in its natural environment, you have no idea what that is like. But it is something that once you've done it, you just can't quit.
You cannot get enough.
No.
You cannot get enough. And I mean, even, you know, you think about a lot of people that have harvested tons and tons of deer. It's still exactly like the first one you ever harvested. So it's definitely something that you can understand why people pursue it and make it, you know, their lifetime hobby.
Yeah. Spend every morning, every evening if they can in the woods, and have to call in sick sometimes because sometimes that's just the way it goes and weather plays out. We've talked about this in years in the past. I was looking, the last time we talked was like 6 years ago. We tried to sit down and do this very thing because you have so much information when it comes to the moon phase, but also the heat and deer going nocturnal.
Yes.
What are you seeing? I keep seeing reports from the different forums that I'm on, you know, and that sort of thing. And it's like, oh no, the bucks have gone nocturnal. One, because of the moon, or two, because of the heat. Is that something that actually happens?
So I think we can squash the moon phase stuff pretty easy.
Okay.
With the advent of GPS collars.
Okay.
We, you know, have the ability to put these on deer. They're just a collar like you would put on your dog.
Yeah.
But they've got a battery pack and an antenna. And via satellite, it can tell us where those deer are at whatever interval you want it to be. We can set it as fine scale or as gross scale as you want. And there is no, you know, relation to moon phase and amount of movement during any given time.
Okay.
So that's just kind of one of the tall tales that you hear from Granddad at the campfire and hunting camp as far as moon phase.
So when it says that the movement's bad due to the moon phase, still get out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
You know, and there's people that they focus on, you know, I'm focusing, this is when I'm hunting because of the moon phase.
Right.
Well, of course they're going to be successful because the only time they hunt is when the moon tells them to.
That's a good point.
But as far as, you know, nocturnal, the deer are still up and moving. It's just the amount of movement that's happening during daytime hours can kind of taper off when the temperatures go up. But again, with it being kind of, we're now November 18th on the backside of peak rut, there's still rut activity going on. So as far as the temperatures go, and especially for a short 16-day gun season, I'm going.
Yeah.
If it's 90 degrees or 9 degrees, there's no better time to be in the woods than right now. You're going to see a slight decrease in activity with higher temperatures, but still not any worse than it was on October 1st.
Okay.
And everybody was crawling and you know, to get into the tree stand then. So just, I mean, take that into consideration. I mean, the deer I harvested this year was at 2 p.m. So they're up and they're moving. You just got to go find where they're at.
Okay, so you mentioned this deer you harvested at 2 p.m. I just have to show this picture if we can, control room, because this was fascinating.
Yeah.
I saw this and I was like, are you kidding me?
Yep.
So this is your deer you harvested on public land, and then a buddy's deer while the northern lights were going on. So you posed them after the fact. I mean, unbelievable. Just talk a little bit about public land. You did this where anyone in Oklahoma who has a license can go, and in the middle of the day. And I mean, that's inspiring to, I mean, so many folks, inspiring to me. I just want to hear a little bit about the story.
Yeah, I mean, so this is on public land in western Oklahoma. Like you said, anybody and everybody that has a hunting license has access to the same exact place that I harvested this deer. It's kind of I've made it a point to hunt as much public as I can, just so I can kind of better understand some of our constituents' concerns.
Yeah.
So, you know, how can you relate with somebody or have the same idea of what they're going through if you haven't done it yourself? So I always make it a point, you know, a couple times a year I go out to public and do some deer hunting. This just happened to be a time where I was successful. You know, super hot that day. I think it was like 82 degrees for the high. I had an unsuccessful morning. I found another little piece that I was interested in at least going and exploring. I glassed that deer up in the bottom of a kind of sand plum thicket and crept in with a decoy. Again, this time of year, those bucks are very protective of the does that they have found. I didn't know he had a doe with her until after I'd shot that deer, but just kind of set up in a perfect spot where I stuck that decoy in the ground, made a couple of the calls that we talked about. I grunted at him a couple times, and he stood up and bristled up, ready to fight. And I mean, at 10 yards, harvested a deer with a bow from the ground. It was an incredible experience. And then obviously, you know, we get back to camp, and I didn't know, I had heard about the northern lights maybe happening.
Sure.
I guess like subconsciously, I was like seeing some stuff over the horizon, and I thought it was a town, like the glow of a town that was to the north of us there. And then I start thinking about it, I'm like, I'm pretty sure I heard like word that was, so I pulled out the phone and I was like, oh my god.
Through the phone, it was incredible.
And then as the night developed, you know, you could kind of start seeing where we were super dark, very little light pollution, so you could see some of the red and green hues, but boy, that phone really just blew it up, and I got to thinking, this would be a really cool picture. So we posed those two heads up and took that snapshot, and I mean, I ordered it to print on canvas.
It needs to be on the wall.
It's going to hang in the living room for sure.
Absolutely. It's amazing. It's amazing what you can see if you're just out in nature, out in wildlife, watching everything kind of in its natural habitat. Can you talk a little bit more about the different areas for public land, what's available? Because I think that is one of the number one complaints, at least what I hear from viewers is, hey, it's great that you have a place to go, but I don't even know where to begin.
Yeah, so I mean, I think a lot of people don't realize how much ground or, you know, land the ODWC has to offer for hunting, fishing, all kinds of outdoor recreation. A little over 1 million acres. I think we're up to like 1.3 million. And that's not including all of the Corps of Engineers properties that are out there eligible to hunt. So I mean, anybody that has a question about where can I go, we have got an awesome website that's super user friendly and it can tell you all that information, just wildlifedepartment.com. If you click on hunting resources, there's a tab that says where to hunt, and you can click on that and it will bring up, some interactive maps where you can look and see it's basically a big satellite imagery map, and you can say, okay, I am here, I live here, where are some of these places. Another option you have is we can sort that by method that you're hunting. So if you want to know, I want to rifle hunt, you can click on that. It'll break down those areas that are open to rifle hunting within whatever region you choose. So if you want to stick to central Oklahoma, northwest, northeast, southwest, southeast, whatever you want to do, however you want to do it, it's a really easy way to find out where you can go hunting. One thing I always tell people, because I don't want them to say, well, Dallas Barber told me I could hunt here.
Sure.
Is to make sure that whenever you choose the area that you're interested in going to hunt, in the back of our reg books is a whole section of every single wildlife management area that we have and some of the special regulations that come with those areas. So make sure that you flip through those and read to see, because there are some areas that are going to be closed for a couple days here and there for controlled hunts. There are some areas that are open to archery but closed to muzzleloader and rifle, or closed to just rifle. There are some areas that have specific, this is only open for the first 9 days of gun season out of our 16-day gun season. So just something to where you don't get yourself in a pickle with one of our law enforcement officers. I always make sure to tell people, read that reg book.
Yeah, it's not just a complete free-for-all, but it is easy to decipher and easy to sort through. I think for a lot of folks that I talk to, moms with their kids or dads with their kids who maybe this is so foreign to them, but they want to be involved. There are so many things that are marketed that it looks like you have to have, a laundry list of 35 items in order to get into the woods. And you were just talking, you were able to harvest a buck 10 yards away.
Yeah.
And you had a little decoy with you, which by the way, we didn't talk a lot about decoys. That's a fascinating way to hunt. But talk about the things that, that you do have to have, and some of these things that, sure they may help, but not something you got to go spend your hard-earned money on.
Yeah, I think that it can be as simple or as complicated as you want it to be. The hunting industry has gotten a little out of control with what people are expected to have or do. As far as licensing goes, we've made it as simple as we possibly can, especially for youth hunters now, where there's just a youth super license. They can purchase that by making an account on our app. You can do all this just from the couch, right? Very low cost. I'm not going to say what it costs because I don't know just right off the top of my head, but very low, 30, 40, 50 bucks. It's not a whole lot of money. But that includes all of the tags that you would ever need for any species in our state. So that's deer hunting, elk hunting, pronghorn hunting, duck hunting, all that kind of stuff, to where it's a one-stop shop. Buy this and you're good to go. I always recommend, it's not necessary to have a hunter safety course, but I highly recommend it.
Yeah.
At some point, you will have to have a hunter safety course, but for a youth hunter, they can get what's called an apprentice license, where they have to hunt with someone who is over the age of 18 that has a valid hunting license and a hunter safety course. That way, they can go without having to get that hunter safety certification. Back when I was growing up, that was something like you had to go somewhere and take a class and all this stuff and test. And they still do that, but now, with the way that online stuff has gotten, there are online classes for it now. You can knock that out in an evening at home instead of watching TV, and you're ready to go hunting. So that's something that's made it really easy. As far as equipment goes, again, that can be as simple or as complicated as you want it to be. Obviously, a weapon or method of take that's legal for the time you're going to be hunting is all you need. Obviously, rifle hunting coming up here pretty soon. Orange hat, orange vest, preferably a headlamp, and
warm boots,
and a backpack, and then whatever clothes you're comfortable in. A lot of people. My granddad harvested deer in blue jeans and a flannel.
Absolutely.
So camo is optional. I think it's more important that you pay attention to the direction of the wind. You don't want the wind blowing in the direction that you think deer are going to be coming from. And just stay still and be quiet and watch, some pretty incredible things happen from there.
When it comes to the scent and the control, the wind is always something that you mentioned.
Wind is key.
Yeah, wind is key. But there are so many things that you can put on that's supposed to block your scent. So you could spend so much money on blocking your scent, doing the thing. And I have tried, because I'm like, okay, I work, so I've got on perfume and hairspray and whatever. So I'm gonna try to mask that. I don't have time to go completely wash everything off. But it doesn't matter what I do. If a deer comes downwind,
you're
they're
going
still
to
gonna
get
stop.
smoked
They're still
every
gonna
time.
stop.
Yeah, so I mean, I to me, the only step that I really take is like I don't wash my hunting clothes in like Tide or
Sure.
Gain. I just use like the scent-free All, I think is what it's
Right.
called, just to where we're not
Adding
pouring
something.
gas on fire, so to speak.
Right.
But then all I do is just hunt the wind. I mean, and there's going to be times where that gets really difficult. You know, some of the mornings here over the last couple of days have been very still,
Yep.
to where you get a lot of swirling winds. You get a lot of thermals that are starting to pull some of that air down into lower lying areas where you feel some breeze coming from one way, but what your scent's doing is something completely different. So it makes it a little difficult. But as the year goes on, we really start picking up more predominant winds. You can predict those. It gets
Yeah.
a little bit better to where we can understand where I need to be compared to where deer are expected to come from, and just always play the wind, and you should be in better shape than if you didn't. I can promise that.
And every day on our morning show, we have a whole segment dedicated to talking about the outdoors, getting into the outdoors,
Yeah.
and every day talk about the wind direction. And, you know, because that is key as much as possible. You can always find it on our News 9 app. You can find it on the Oklahoma Mesonet. It's a
Yep.
great resource for your area that can show you exactly what the
Yeah.
wind direction
The
is.
Mesonet's a great tool to
Yeah.
use because it's a lot more fine scale than,
Right.
I mean, you look at how many stations they have all across the state
Exactly.
that are giving you a little bit finer scale details on what some of your weather is going to do there. But yeah, just click that wind button and it'll give you a pretty good story of what's going to go on throughout the day.
And then you can choose. Choose exactly what you're going to do if you have the options to kind of choose around. As far as 2025 goes, you mentioned there's been enough food. The deer herd is doing great.
Yes.
What do you think we should look forward to coming up in the coming years as far as hunters go, as far as getting into the outdoors, and how important is it to help as far as conservation is concerned?
Yeah, I mean, you know, the last, I kind of feel like a broken record every time we talk
know.
about this because times are good.
Right.
We have done it. When I say we, I mean our hunters.
Sure.
I, as a wildlife biologist, and I, as an employee for the wildlife department, I just make recommendations. And what our hunters do with those is what real boots on the ground conservation is. So our hunters have done an awesome job at taking some of that really by the reins. When you start looking at our antlerless harvest, they've done a wonderful job to really take that and put it on the ground. So things are looking good. Deer numbers are great. I expect harvest numbers to continue to we've really kind of found a sweet spot where we're at over the last 3 or 4 years, that 110 to 130,000 deer a year being harvested. As long as we can keep that 40 to 45, 47% antlerless harvest, we should be in good shape. So there's no better time to be an Oklahoma deer hunter than right now.
Are you a trophy hunter?
No, not particularly. I appreciate
Sure.
a good deer, don't get me wrong. But I always go out with the intent of I just want to harvest a good representation of what a mature deer is, whether that be, you know, a 180-inch deer or a 135-inch deer, as long as that deer's mature.
Yeah.
So we're looking, you know, 4.5 or older. That's kind of my goal, and regardless of what he's got on top of his head, I'm happy. But then I also fill a whole lot of antlerless tags too.
Absolutely.
Because I like to eat them.
Why is it important, just for folks that have no idea, to take a mature deer?
Yeah. So I mean, obviously, it's more of a challenge just because that deer has seen some things. It's kind of like the
Right.
State Farm guy. Like we know a thing or two because we've seen a thing.
Yes,
or two.
exactly.
But that's just a personal goal that I have. There's not anything from a biological standpoint that is better or worse for your deer herd for harvesting young deer, old deer, mature deer, whatever it may be. That's just a personal goal that I set for
Sure.
myself.
Yeah.
And there is no right or wrong way to do any of it. So that's just something that I hold myself to. Obviously, as you mature as a deer, your antlers get bigger, so there's a better chance for having a nice set of antlers, but it's not the sole reason why I choose to harvest a deer.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. Is there anything looking ahead to gun season opening or the holiday antlerless season?
Yeah.
We haven't even talked about that. Let's talk about that for just a
Yeah.
second before we wrap up here.
Yeah.
About the holiday antlerless season, how important it is,
Yes.
how wonderful timed it is too for a lot of folks being off
Yeah,
work.
so you know, from December 18th to December 31st, most zones in our state are all open for an antlerless deer season, deer gun season. You can harvest 2 antlerless deer during that season. Really, it's one more time to get out with the family or friends to kind of experience the woods. Two, it just really helps with a lot of crop depredation issues. So that time of year, we've gotten really late into winter, and food sources have really kind of dried up. Natural forages are dormant, so you'll start seeing deer moving a lot towards our winter wheat crops. And this is a way to help alleviate some of that pressure. But it also helps, just one more way for people to have a really efficient method to go out and help even that buck to doe ratio up a little bit.
It's one of my favorite seasons.
A freezer filling opportunity.
Yeah, you're kind of like, hey, you know what? I haven't been that successful. I've been really choosy. Now I don't have to be choosy. And
exactly.
Yeah.
And by that time, a lot of our processors have kind of gotten through the rush of that typical rifle season, or our standard deer gun season. So that's another option. The Hunters Against Hunger program has really gotten going here in the state, to where you can go donate that deer and it goes to food banks all across our state. So something to take into consideration. You can find a list of those participating processors on our website. And I've already done 2 this year.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's a great resource. And for so many folks may not even know that's an option.
Exactly. And I mean, it kind of takes the excuse away for people to say, well, I don't have room in my freezer. Well, let me tell you about an option that we have for you. Yeah. Especially, during times like we've had here over the last couple months of a lot of food insecurity. It's something that a lot of our hunters have kind of said, hey, we've got an option for some people that can really help out a lot of families.
I love that. Is there anything else you want to add as we head towards rifle season or the deer season this year?
Wear your orange, buy your tags, and go have fun would be my three pointers to you guys. Yeah.
I love it. It's perfect. And of course, we'll continue to have more on the forecast of what to expect as we get closer.
I will be watching.
Season. Oh, please do. Please do. I'll be off quite a bit of that time as well. I schedule my vacation accordingly.
Sick days, huh?
Usually. Oh, yes. Hope my bosses aren't watching. I know. We call it buck fever. It's a real thing. But anyway, this has been an awesome episode. Thank you so much, Dallas, for joining me. And we hope you will join us on our next episode of our Beyond the Forecast podcast. Thank you, guys.